Hey there, this is the Resistor Vic Podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference.
Hey everybody, this is Big Mike, your home for progressive news, issues, and politics here in Colorado. Filling in, of course, for Resistor Vic while he runs for House District 47 here in Colorado. Support him however you can. And a reminder to all of my Colorado fans, ballots are out. Get yours filled out and turned in as soon as possible. I've got mine right here. Got it in the mail yesterday. It's going in the Dropbox tomorrow. Today, I'm interviewing Gary Lux. Gary is an environmental lawyer and community organizer with his new book out, We Are the Power to Win the Future. I've got one right here. I ordered off of Amazon. So let me throw it over. Gary, introduce yourself and tell people how you got into this line of work.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so I started my political activity when I was in college, and it's been 4 decades plus since every election, every 2 years. And those early years were just more about, turning out the vote. And my preference as an environmental lawyer is just doing policy. And I've had the opportunity to write briefing papers for our Governor Newsom here in California, for several elected officials from Feinstein to many legislators in the California legislature and so on. That's my preference. I much prefer policy, and that's my strength. But we all have a duty of citizenship, and that is to be part of our process here, and we can't rely on other people to deliver what we need, which is a free and fair elections and so on. So for a long time, I just worked on campaigns. And in 2004, when John Kerry narrowly lost the presidency, I realized I had to do more. And so I stepped forward and formed the Progressive Action East Bay. I live in the Bay Area, so the Progressive Action East Bay. And we worked really hard to win back power in 2006 when Nancy Pelosi regained the gavel. And then in 2008, when Obama became the president. And then we got complacent. And we did that at our own peril. And then years later, we got back into action, and the Progressive Action East Bay became the Resistance Action East Bay in 2016, where we became one of the very first indivisible groups and have been a legacy indivisible group ever since, and have grown to about 1,200 volunteers. And then the book came about just because 10 years of road-tested strategies that worked for our star in the overall constellation, I felt there was a need to share that. And what I find, and I suspect you and others listening are quite clear on what the problem is. And there's saturated discussion around why we're here and what the problem is, and virtually nothing, in my opinion, that gives people something to sink their teeth into how we fix the problem, no matter where we sit as regular, ordinary citizens. And so I wrote the book because I wanted to offer a roadmap to people who are worried, concerned, frustrated, no matter where they live, where you live in a purple region of the country, a blue or red region. There's a menu of choices where people can step in. So that's the overarching background and the genesis, what brought me to writing the book.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned after Obama's election, and I believe even the Obama coalition kind of falling apart after he was elected. I mean, what role is the Democrats' failure to capitalize on the Obama presidency, at the fault of the Democratic Party?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, I'm a big fan of Obama. He's one of my heroes, but I think he failed to pound his chest. And, he was a policy wonk. And we as Democrats and progressives hear about policy, but we don't. shouted out to the mountaintops, right? We are focused on the nuance, and that does not speak to people in terms of an emotional connection. And so the Democratic Party, in my view, needs to step forward and put a lot more energy and effort into a 24/7 war room mentality on how we message. And we need to message in a way that's going to resonate with people and let go of the wonky policy and speak to people's hearts. And so that's one thing that we've not done well. And as far as building on all of the organization that Obama came together with, and then it left with him. And we need to sustain, we have a new Democratic chair, Ken Martin, and he's got a 50-state strategy. And for decades, because the Democrats had not had the financial advantage, they had to make tough choices. And so for quite a while, they've only focused on six or seven states, the battleground states, and did not invest in building the bench in the other states. And then as a result, we've suffered the consequences because we've not won as many state legislative seats, governors' mansions, or even the courts in all the other states. And so that has to change. And I think with the new leadership with Ken Martin, that seems clear that that's the vision. We have to invest in all 50 states, build a bench, and not lose the opportunity to fairly district during the decennial and leave that to the Republicans. So that's all a long way of saying we need to message better, and we need to invest in all 50 states. And the other thing I'll just share is my understanding is that the Democratic Party at the national level had part-time people in the individual states. And then every 2 years they would resurrect and hire and then fire. And you need a full-time staffing in all 50 states. And that's my understanding that's happening now. And so I think lessons have been learned. There's been malpractice along the way, and it's time to lick our wounds and get behind not just the Democratic Party, but the 80 organizations I list in the book that will supplement and synergize the efforts of the party.
So would you argue that we actually have something to learn from Trump? You mentioned, Obama was a policy wonk. Basically, we're electing nerds and the Republicans are electing the prom king. Is there something to be learned there in strategy?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as my good friend who's a former state senator says, Trump is an evil genius, right? And he has this ability to connect with people. And, there's an emotional aspect around connectivity. And so, yeah, absolutely. He's not an articulate, thoughtful person. He's lazy and so on. But what he has is this reptilian brain that we can learn from how you connect. And yes, absolutely. And it's up to us to learn the lessons, right? And deploy them. And, my book is all about how people can engage and do what we can in our lane. But the other lane is the leadership in our movement. And our movement really needs to really invest in the messaging, because you're on this progressive podcast, fantastic, right? But we're losing the media battle with the voices and all the other media avenues. And so this is the long game we have to play to rebuild so we can not be at a disadvantage in messaging.
Got it. And you mentioned Ken Martin and the DNC leadership. And again, I feel as a leftist, I was a disaffected leftist for a long time, had no faith in the Democratic Party. After this last election, me and my wife literally sat down and we were like, are we leaving or are we going to stay and fight? So we decided to stay and fight, decided, the Democratic Party is the only option. I wish I could go vote for a DSA candidate for president. It's not an option. So in the meantime, I'm here organizing for the Democrats. I'm sure, I don't know if you've checked out my channel, but I've been interviewing all of their candidates. As a leftist who feels like the DNC does not listen to its own base, as the Republican Party clearly does, what incentive do I have as a leftist, as a progressive, to get involved when it seems like the party doesn't want me here half the time?
I relate to a lot of that. I'd vote differently if I could, right? I'm more of a Green Party or Democratic Socialist, but I'm a realist and I'm a pragmatic player in this whole scene, in this whole matter. So yeah, absolutely. We do that at our own peril if we leave and we check out, right? And 90 million people didn't show up in 2024. And the presidency was decided by 230,000 votes in 3 states in the Midwest states, from Pennsylvania to Wisconsin, and drawing a blank on the other one, maybe Minnesota. But in any event, we have to stay, right? People have devoted their lives, 700,000 people died in the Civil War and the Revolutionary War as well, for us to have this opportunity as we celebrate our 250th year of our country. And it's a small price to pay in service, to be involved and engage and to play, right? People died on the battlefield. A little bit of effort can go a long way in being part of our service, right? So I say, no, we have to stay and fight. And it's a small investment compared to what other people invest in and the price they pay.
That's very well put. And on that same note, we've had a rise of DSA and working families parties. We have AOC, Zora Mamdani in New York. Here in Colorado, we have Julie Gonzalez, one of the founding members of the working family parties here in Colorado, running against John Hickenlooper for Senate. What are they doing right to get their message across and to get their candidates as Democrats across the finish line?
I think they just speak the truth authentically, right? I think Democrats, we've had these highly paid consultants that road test messaging, and they're getting enriched at our expense. And I think ultimately we speak the truth, we speak authentically from our heart. People relate to that. Even Trump, even though he's a disingenuous man, people felt like he was speaking to them. And so, and I think we're more of a center left country than we are a center right country. But because of voter suppression and disenfranchisement at the polls, people, like with Clinton, when he was the president, he triangulated trying to speak to a broader base. But at the end of the day, people relate to AOC. They relate to Mamdani because they're speaking to them and their day-to-day concerns with just, they can see through it and it's true, right? So I think we just have to be ourselves and stop road testing our messaging and speak from the heart.
I also wanted to talk about a quote I marked off in your book that I really liked. You say, "It is one person showing up for another person, a neighbor at the door, an actual conversation, the experience of being taken seriously by someone who looked you in the eye and meant it. That is something no media machine can replicate. That is what you are doing." I thought that was a great quote. And if you could kind of just go over for us the importance of in-person organizing and going door to door and having those conversations.
Yeah, it's really the retail connections with people that will yield results, and it's what we have to do. We are almost 5 months away from the most consequential election in our democracy, and it is up to people to do their part. Think about how much time we complain and worry and are frustrated based on reading the newspaper or listening to the news. And I would contend those minutes turn into hours. And at the end of the month, you've complained and worried for maybe 10, 15 hours a month, right? Take 3 or 4 of those hours, take a percentage of that and invest in retail connections, do your service, right? And knocking on doors, committing to doing so moves the needle in the blue direction. And the data shows by knocking on the door and having a personal connection yields is as a 7% effectiveness rate compared to roughly half of that for making phone calls and half of making phone calls. So it's 7% for knocking on doors, 3 to 4% with phone calls, and 1 to 2% for postcards. Well, not to say that that the latter strategies are not effective, but the most effective thing is personal connections.
And would you say so I did my first in-person canvass this year for Mayor of Centennial. We elected our first Democratic mayor in our city's history. And it was great to get out. And what I found was, people are not annoyed that you're there. Could you tell us a little bit about the ability to make those connections and what to expect for first-time organizers who are just getting out there?
Yeah, so a lot of people have a misconception around canvassing, believing that it's up to them to do the Herculean effort of convincing someone or persuading someone to vote your way or to show up at the polls. At the end of the day, the vast majority of the ground game is focused primarily on bringing those in your column and energizing and motivating them and educating them on voting. So the persuasion is intimidating to the vast majority of people. And our goal is just really to bring the converted out, because 90 million people didn't show up in 2024. A lot of people are occasional voters. They sometimes feel their vote doesn't matter, unfortunately. And it's up to us to do it with by knocking on doors. And the other thing to note is if you do it with someone, and oftentimes you are paired with someone, that energizes and synergizes. So you're not alone in your effort, and you build connections. And, on occasion, for sure, you're going to have someone who's unfriendly. And that's, in my experience of doing this for ages, it's the rare exception, but it'll happen. And when or if it does happen, I just, it's kind of basic to say, I just step back, and breathing, whether you meditate or otherwise, the power of breathing. And it can change your physiology. Just take 2 or 3 deep breaths, go see your partner who's across the street, and then get back at it, right? But it's really the exception, and you're not having to persuade. You're there just to help engage and educate people on where their polling places, details associated with that, because a lot of people need that little bit of education to prompt them and direct them.
And there's a lot of discussion these days about the male loneliness epidemic. Do you think, getting involved in your community, obviously we've had, falls in union organization, falls in, the Elks Lodges and these traditional community organizations. Do you think this would be a good replacement for young men to invest their time and energy?
Well, yeah, there's so much isolation, right? With all kinds of reasons, from people don't go to church or synagogue like they used to. There's just isolation with people locked into the algorithms on their phones. So there's a lot of disconnection, whether it's men or women, primarily men. And so, I lead a group of 1,200 volunteers, and we have a lot of men and women, and they skew to the older level for a variety of reasons. But the community is connection, right? And friendships have been formed. There's just this kind of community feel because there's an absence of community connections. And by being part of the group, whether it's an indivisible group or any one of the 80 organizations we list in my book, that synergize and connect with the democratic mission, it's really friendships are formed. And, you can be alone in despair or together in connection, right? And be with kindred spirits. And there's synergy, and there's data I write about in the book that shows that people are more resilient and happier when they are in connection. So absolutely. And doing something meaningful is powerful.
And you said you're in the Bay Area, is that right? And what is the population of that area in general?
So I live in Oakland. I think the Bay Area population from, San Francisco down to Silicon Valley, it's probably like 9 to 10 million people.
Okay.
It's kind of the main population center in Northern California next to Sacramento. And then Southern California is at 60% of the state. The Northern Cal is about 40% of the state, and the Bay Area is the big player in that demographic.
So tell us, with that population size, you've got 1,200 volunteers. What kind of impact are you able to have on that population with just, in comparison to a handful of people?
Yeah, you can't underestimate even a handful of people, quite frankly. But, we've been at it for 10 years. And we started in 2017. And our first big effort with lots and lots of planning was a big fundraiser. And people were demoralized. And we turned that anxiety and concern into action. And we netted about just under $20,000 with a lot of work. And I'm really proud to say our first effort yielded significant results because we gave the first seed money to an organization at the time that was called Flip the 14th. Back then, there were 53 or 54 congressional seats. Most of them were in the hands of the Democrats, and 14 were in the hands of Republicans. And the goal was to flip those red seats to blue. And the organization we helped with the seed money flipped 7 of those 14 seats from red. And now that organization morphed into Activate America. And we feature them in the book. They're an amazing organization, and they're one of many road-tested, effective organizations that they have now, in this case, a nationwide focus on the swing states. So, we're one star in the constellation of 300 indivisible groups in California. And so imagine if people joined an indivisible group or whatever and did their part. And I'll just close by just saying that effort of raising money, we learned a valuable lesson that it's a very time consuming to put together a face-to-face in-person event. It's great. It's fun. And for all kinds of reasons, it's powerful. But what we morphed into is what we call parties for democracy. And that is basically an underutilized approach to raising money and awareness through virtual parties. And I'm happy to tell you about that. And I'll close by saying we raised $450,000 in just 3 months by doing Parties for Democracy, virtual parties in 2020. And imagine if indivisible groups all followed that, and other organizations and your listeners did so, we could raise millions and millions of dollars by leveraging their networks of friends and families across the country, whether they're in the purple, red, or blue district. So I'd love to talk to you more about that if you'd like.
Absolutely. And I read a bit about it in the book. In fact, I want to give you the chance. Tell people this is very much not a novel in any sense. It's more of a guidebook, a resource. You have this long list of organizations in the back for people to get involved with. How do you want people to use this book? And what is the goal, and how do you give people a chance to how do you want people to use the book?
Yeah, it's less of it's not a novel. Behind me is my textbook. I wrote co-wrote a 500-page environmental law textbook, right? That you use that book and this book as a reference guide, and it's not meant to be read from front to back. it's really, it's organized by blue, purple, and red. So if you live in a purple, red, or blue congressional district or state, then there's a menu of choices. So you can go right to let's say Colorado is largely blue, but they're red pockets and they're purple pockets, right? So, a lot of the same ideas are shared from blue, purple, and red, but there's an emphasis. So on your region. And so in the back, as you mentioned, there are about 80 organizations that are organized by their purpose and their function, whether it's protecting the vote, whether it's organizing, whether it's I have to look at my let me see. We can get it right here. So, whether it's legal defense, whether it's media, whether it's changing the system, election integrity, and campaign finance reform. So we list the organizations, progressive organizations, social media, voter registration. So you can join one of those organizations, you can join an indivisible group, and you can just drill into that part of the book that serves your need and functionally. Yeah,
Gotcha.
The reference.
And then I want to play devil's advocate a little bit here, because obviously mobilized to defend democracy. However, as a leftist, I feel largely ignored by democracy. And we've got Donald Trump at the head of our country right now. So defend democracy for me. Why, as someone who has not been impressed with the results, what is the benefit of preserving this democracy?
Well, just look at 2 months ago, Viktor Orban was defeated after 16 years of autocracy. And I promise you talk to the vast majority of people who worked to defeat Orban in Hungary, their choice between a democracy or autocracy would be an easy choice. Orban basically systematically undermined the Constitution, emasculated the courts, and shut down the free press. And imagine living in a country where it basically opened the door for more wealth disparity, where oligarchs basically had all the power and opportunity, and the working class and the poor and the middle class were just sidelined. And so that is not a country I want to live in, and I'm willing to fight for that no matter what. Because and frankly, you and I, and many of your listeners, we've had the luxury of living with all of these freedoms and liberties, due process, freedom of speech, and so on, that are not perfect, but that we've taken for granted. And suddenly now you shine a spotlight on what we are at risk of losing, what those in Hungary lost for 16 years. And it's really clear to me that this is something that we have to fight for, because the alternative is just not even worth considering.
So all the way back to, Plato's Republic, then, more recently you have, Lenin and Marx that argue democracy and capitalism do not mix. Essentially, you're always going to have a bourgeois class that will seek to take over your democracy. Do you view capitalism and democracy as antithetical? And how do we move forward and ensure that we don't end up as an oligarchy with, democracy in name only?
I don't know. Some of your listeners may be familiar with Lawrence O'Donnell from MS Now. And Lawrence O'Donnell refers to himself as a socialist. And, when I read what O'Donnell wrote about how he sees his ideology through that lens, I resonated with it. Like, sure, I may call myself a Democrat or democratic socialist, but I don't believe that we're ready for a revolution. And I think he sees this ideology through the lens of a blend of capitalism and socialism together, just like, like the Scandinavian countries and others. We're a socialist country, and we don't even call ourselves that. We've got Medicare, Medicaid, we have Social Security, right? And so I believe we just have to build the foundational guardrails within our system so that we can check the oligarchical and exploitative risk that is always going to be there, right? And as we get to a more perfect union, we put those guardrails in place that strengthen our institutions, our courts, our universities, and other norms that have been impacted through this administration. We need to win back power. And in doing so, we need to strengthen all of what the Constitution is driving towards so we can check those worst instincts that are always going to be there, and it's always going to be about.
All right. And we have the technology now to really initiate a direct democracy. And some would argue that would, more fairly represent everyone. You have issues of 76% agreement amongst the American people with zero chance of getting through Congress, such as Medicare for all, things like that. What is your opinion on a direct democracy? I'm not asking, I don't think it'll ever happen, but would that be a more direct system? I mean, you could still have courts in place to rule on constitutionality, things like that. But do you see that ever being an option?
Yeah, I've not really studied that, and I can't really say how practical that is. But to your point about agreement, I have a friend who wrote a book called In This Together, a friend named Bill Shireman. They call him Bottle Bill because he helped pioneer the bottle bill in California. And he's an amazing guy. And Bill points out that, to your point, that roughly 70% of us agree on 90% of the issues. There's the extreme left who will never agree, and the extreme right, that's 30%. But 70% agree on 90% of the issues, like gun safety, for example, name an issue. And so there's quite a bit of agreement, but there's so much polarization that keeps us from coming together and working towards what we all agree upon. So I think that's an important premise to understand. And back to what I said earlier, the more we can get past polarization and disinformation, the more we can come together and actually and address fairness in our elections and campaign finance reform and so on. We can actually serve that 70% that care about 90% of the issues.
Gotcha. Then my last devil's advocate question. We have an authoritarian left that we call tankies on the internet. And a lot of times, basically Marxist-Leninists, the folks who are for revolution, that kind of thing. And, a lot of them point to China leading the green energy revolution, building, hundreds of thousands of miles of high-speed rail, the U.S. lagging behind in both of those. They point to China as an example of, maybe democracy isn't the best. So what are your thoughts there? Why is China not the model we want?
Yeah, sure. I mean, without a doubt, they're kicking our butt with green energy, transformation, electric vehicles, and so on, without a doubt. But democracy and freedom of speech and all that goes with that is messy, and it's not fun sometimes, right? But I would much rather live with the freedoms that we have in this country. Their citizens don't have. That's my dog who's guarding the house. He's a scary golden retriever. In any event, their citizens don't have the freedom of speech or assembly. And given a choice, where would you rather? What kind of country would you rather live in? I'm deeply concerned about the impacts that we've had, or that the Trump administration has had on the Inflation Reduction Act and the $1.2 trillion bipartisan legislation that worked towards the green infrastructure. And we lost a lot of momentum, and it's really unfortunate, but we can rebuild that, right? And ultimately, what we need to be thinking about is so much damage has been done in this administration, but there's an opportunity in the next 10, 12, 15 years to, as Biden said, build back better. We can learn from you can get lessons learned from where our guardrails were not strong enough and how we can strengthen our institutions and we can address the norms that were taken for granted, and we can codify. And there are several books out there on what we can and need to do to strengthen the courts and so on. So, I feel we have to sprint and do everything we can in the next 5 months. And if we hold on to our democracy, which we must do, then it's my son's in college, and it's his generation that needs to strengthen and build back better. So we're not in this mess. And it's always going to be a reforming opportunity to strengthen and refine. But that's kind of really where our mission needs to be.
Gotcha. And Gary, someone ideally watching this has been frustrated. They want to get involved and they don't know where to start. What's your best piece of advice for a first timer just getting into politics, kind of just awakening to all this?
Yeah, it ties back to what we discussed earlier. There's strength in community, right? And so joining any one of the 80 organizations I list in the book, there's anywhere from an Indivisible, there are 2,600 indivisible groups across the country. You can go on the web and find one with your neighborhood. There's Activate America, the great organization I mentioned earlier, we helped fund initially. There's Swing Left, which is a great organization that really gets the vote out. There's Flip the Vote. There is the States Project, which is an amazing organization that's working to build the efforts to go beyond just the 7 battleground states, but in all 50 states to win back both of the houses, the Senate and Assembly and state legislatures, so they get the courts back and then can have fair gerrymandering, if you will. And so that's the States Project, and get 70 some other organizations. So number one, join an organization, build friendships, community, and realize you are not alone. Right. My first book my first activist book was "You Are Not Alone: A Roadmap to Effective Political Action." We're not alone, right? So joining a group is number one, and especially people in red regions who feel lost and alone, and find your community and realize you are actually not just isolated, but they're friends and family and connections that are not far away. So yes, join a group.
And I just want to build on that. As I said, me and the wife got involved after the last election. I started this channel. She has now, she's like vice president of our Arapahoe County Young Democrats. She's on the board for the Colorado Young Democrats. We are both precinct organizers here in Arapahoe County. It's been great. We've made so many new friends, so many new connections. We're actually bringing our elderly neighbor to a Democratic picnic this afternoon. So because they did not have a ride. So it's been great. And I just want to encourage everybody watching, get involved. You will make friends. You will meet people. And it really inspires you to, again, realize you're not alone in this and you have people on your side. So, Gary, tell the people where they can find your book, where they can find more information, and where they can reach you.
Absolutely. Before I do, can I say, I want to share, just build on what you just said. So
absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that I've not shared with you that we have spent a lot of time and effort on is we first would show up every week at the transit stops there's a regional transit system in the Bay Area called the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, so known as BART. And so every week we would be at BART as people would be coming down the escalator at the end of their day, and we'd hand out flyers like this here on the issue of the day, no matter what, whether it's Prop 50 or the Wisconsin Supreme Court race or you name it. We in the flyer we'd say it would be branded with Indivisible. On the back would be a QR code, and we would do the homework. So people be coming home and we would give them the 2-minute opportunity with the QR code of where they should give their time or money to make a difference. And that morphed into now 7 or so farmers markets on the weekends where we hand out flyers, and we're like the trusted advisors at the farmers market, or it could be at a shopping center or a transit stop. And usually in farmers markets, they tend to skew blue, and we hand out in a 2-hour shift of a couple of volunteers, about 200 flyers every weekend per shift, times 7, that's 1,000 flyers a weekend, right, in the Bay Area. And it's an amazing opportunity to connect. And so it strengthens the connections with the volunteers that show up and hand out the flyers. But I was at a farmer's market yesterday, and people come up to me and they thank me. They're like, "Oh my God, thank you for doing this." Because people know they want to do something, but we do the homework. And so you're the trusted advisor. So you're actually building community. And sometimes we talk politics, and I see the same people every weekend. So that's one thing that is in the book. We have a whole toolkit on how people can build this type of program in their community as well. And imagine if we had, and it's not rocket science, it's just underutilized. If we had thousands of farmers markets across the country, how we can engage people and give them some hope and opportunity. So I just wanted to share that tactic, which is in the book as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess my question is, like you mentioned, farmers markets lean blue. I feel like they probably also lean, upper middle class. Do you have any tips on how to reach the working class, the people that don't have time to go to farmers markets on the weekend, the people who shop at Walmart because they can't afford anywhere else? How do we reach those people?
Yeah, well, then there's the swap meets, right? So there's swap meets where people will go as well, and it skews to a different demographic, right? Let's see, there are sometimes community activities or soccer games. And so you raised a good point. It's something I need to think more about because we haven't invested there like we should. But we start where our demographic works, and we want to grow from there. So you raised a good point. I need to give more thought to that. That's all I can say at this moment. The other thing I wanted to just expand on, if I can, is what we call the Parties for Democracy fundraising effort. And so in 2020, we were working on a big concert to raise money, awareness, and get people involved. And we had great connections with, we were working with the former bass player for Bonnie Raitt, who was on our team. We had a friend who's the producer for the High Sierra Music Festival. And we had people who knew the music industry. And the goal was to have a big fundraising party in the summer of 2020. And 6 months of planning was derailed by COVID. And the silver lining was we didn't give up. Then we developed this, what we call Parties for Democracy Zoom calls. And as I mentioned, we raised $450,000, our one little indivisible group, in 3 months. And we have a whole toolkit and I write about it in the book, and it's on our website, on how people can do the same. And we work with and hold the hand of the host. And for example, for my birthday, you can do it for a birthday theme, a half birthday theme, or, hey, I just care about saving our democracy and fairness and justice. And I raised $20,000 in 1 hour. Now, I And the amount of time and effort to plan a party to raise money is, as I mentioned earlier, is a lot of work. Whereas if you do a Zoom party and you feature 2 or 3 of the organizations from Activate America to Swing Left to you name one of the organizations, you choose as the host or co-host which organization or organizations you want to feature. And in a 1-hour curated Zoom call, you can invite friends and family, not just where you live, but across the country. And at 5:00 on a Thursday, they're at their desk anyway. And we have a whole curated approach. And on average, we've raised $8,000 to $10,000 per host. So let's say it's $10,000 for one host. 10 hosts is $100K. And now we're working on a party. We just raised. We had 2 parties in the last 2 months. We raised $40K in those 2 parties. We have another party coming up in 2 weeks where 800 people are invited. We're hoping to raise $40K. And it all goes to the grassroots organizations that supplement the Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party alone is not going to save us, and the grassroots organizations alone will not. But synergistically together, helping all of them through Zoom parties is a powerful way to make a difference.
Absolutely. And again, I want to give you the chance to let people know where they can find your books and how they can support you and your program.
Yeah. So so the book is available. You can get it through Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon, and you can also get the book by just ordering it from your local bookstore and just have it delivered there. There's also an ebook as well. It was the #1 release for almost a month on Amazon for political advocacy. Now it's been out for about 6 weeks now, so it's no longer a new release, but it's getting a lot of momentum. And I just wanted to get in people's hands because people need to know what to do and how to do it, no matter where you sit.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I did break my Amazon boycott to get this book because I needed it at time to read for the interview. So I apologize to everyone out there. I did order one thing from Amazon and I apologize. Okay.
And I do the same. So don't let perfection be the enemy of the good when there's so much on the line.
That's
and
right.
they're going to make pittance, not going to make any money off it. So, if you want to get the book ASAP, order on Amazon, but I've broken my boycott as well. And there's also a boycott. I write about a boycott. There's a whole piece in there on how we can promote and support companies that support progressive causes and Democrats through, it's called the Goods Unite Us app. It's amazing. You can buy blue by supporting companies that through the Federal Elections Commission data demonstrates which companies support Democrats and which companies support Republicans. And so there's a whole opportunity to vote with your dollars by downloading the Goods Unite Us app, which is all explained in the book.
Yes. In fact, I remember reading that. I've been meaning to download that. And I wish I had checked Barnes & Noble before buying on Amazon. I'm kicking myself now. But Gary, it's been great. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And best of luck to you. And keep us updated on how sales are.
Thank you. Well, much appreciated. And let's just win this thing and have no regrets. Leave it all on the field and have a victory lap in November. Thank you.
Sounds good, sir. Have fun at your farmer's market today.
All right, my friend. Take care. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm Resistor Vic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also resistorvic@gmail.com. Thanks again.